It was an ordinary afternoon. The kind where the sun was shining just right and everything seemed calm in my neighborhood. I was finishing up some yard work, trimming the hedges and picking up a few stray leaves, thinking about nothing more complicated than what I might have for dinner later. That sense of peace, however, was about to be completely shattered in the most unexpected way. I noticed her car first, a shiny SUV pulling slowly into the driveway across from mine. At first, I thought it was a new neighbor or someone lost. But the moment the door swung open and she stepped out, I knew this wasn't going to be a casual visit. She had that unmistakable look in her eyes, a mix of entitlement and impatience, and I immediately recognized the classic Karen energy that we've all seen make the news or viral videos online. But seeing it live, in front of my own property, was a whole different experience. She started walking toward me, heels clicking sharply on the pavement, her face a picture of irritation, like the world owed her an apology for existing. I tried to smile politely and nod, because that's what you do when someone approaches aggressively. You test the waters first. But she wasn't here to exchange pleasantries. She launched right into it, pointing her finger as she spoke, demanding things I hadn't even realized were an issue yet. She said that my hedges were too tall, and that they were blocking her view of the street, and that my decorations in the yard were offensive and needed to be removed immediately. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was absurd, but the conviction in her voice made it clear she expected immediate compliance. I tried to remain calm, telling her that I wasn't aware of any issues and that my property was well within city codes. She cut me off mid-sentence, raising her voice louder than necessary, claiming that she had called the HOA and that they would be involved if I didn't act immediately. The way she said it made it sound like she had armies of authority figures ready to storm my house, even though I knew very well that the HOA had no such power over minor yard decorations. Still, the threat of confrontation, especially when coming from someone who seemed so determined, made my heart race just a little. As she continued, her body language became even more aggressive. She leaned over the fence separating our properties, pointing and gesturing. While I instinctively took a step back, I realized that this wasn't just a casual complaint, it was a calculated attempt to intimidate me. The way she moved, the sharpness in her tone, even the flicker of anger in her eyes, all screamed that she was used to getting her way. I remembered countless stories online of people giving in to similar threats, and I knew right away that yielding was not an option. I wasn't about to let someone disrupt my peace or take advantage of me on my own property. Despite my initial shock, I started observing her more closely. I noticed small details, how she kept checking her phone, presumably to document the encounter, how she exaggerated every gesture to make it seem more threatening, and how she occasionally glanced at neighbors' windows, probably hoping for witnesses. Everything she did was performative, and it became clear that her goal was to provoke a reaction that she could later present as proof that I was the unreasonable one. This realization helped me calm down slightly, because once you understand that someone is performing rather than genuinely threatening, you gain the upper hand mentally. Even though I was trying to stay composed, there was an undeniable tension. My neighbors were starting to notice, some peeking from their windows, and I could feel the weight of their curious stares. I didn't want this to escalate into a scene, but at the same time, I wasn't going to let her dictate what I did on my own property. I listened patiently as she continued her tirade, letting her words roll off like water off a duck's back, while I silently started thinking through my next steps. I knew that reacting impulsively could make things worse, and I needed a strategy. Then, without warning, she crossed a boundary I wasn't expecting. She leaned across my property line, practically stepping into my yard, and began gesturing wildly at my flower beds, shouting that they were ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic. That's when I realized that this confrontation was no longer just verbal, it was an invasion. The audacity of someone to come onto your property, thinking that entitlement alone gave them authority, is jarring. I could see my neighbors beginning to whisper and peek, and I knew this had the potential to spiral into a bigger spectacle. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that control over my own reaction was the first victory in any confrontation like this. She paused briefly, as if waiting for me to cave in, and when I didn't respond in fear or anger, her expression shifted from irritation to something more calculating. That's when I understood that this was the exact moment I needed to leverage. The unexpected threat wasn't just her words or her presence. It was the opportunity to turn her own aggression against her. I realized that every exaggerated claim, every pointing finger, every angry shout could be used to document her behavior if necessary. Suddenly, what had started as an overwhelming and stressful encounter became a puzzle. A scenario where careful observation and patience could turn the tables. By the end of those first tense minutes, I had already made a mental map of the situation. I knew which paths she might take, how she might escalate, and what evidence could be gathered if the confrontation continued. The unexpected threat had transformed into an unexpected chance not just to protect my property, but to outsmart someone who clearly underestimated me. That initial shock, the sudden intrusion into what should have been a peaceful afternoon, set the stage for the clever moves I would make next. It was the kind of situation where every second counted. We're staying calm, thinking strategically, and understanding human behavior could turn a potentially intimidating encounter into a story of victory. By the time she finally stepped back for a moment, catching her breath after her angry speech, I was ready. Ready not just to respond, but to outsmart her entirely. That's how the unexpected threat began quietly, with a seemingly ordinary day, yet explosively, with a confrontation that demanded composure, intelligence, and a little bit of creativity. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about defending my property, it was about proving that calm and clever thinking can triumph over entitlement and aggression. No matter how shocking the situation may seem at first, the moment she took a step back, glaring and fuming as if she had already won, I realized that the real challenge was just beginning. It wasn't just about her threats anymore. It was about maintaining control over myself, my emotions, and the situation. My heart was still racing, a mix of adrenaline and disbelief. But I knew that losing my composure would only give her the upper hand. Every story I had ever read or seen about these confrontations had the same lesson. The person who stays calm under pressure is the one who ultimately comes out ahead. I took a deep breath, focusing on the sounds around me, the distant laughter of kids playing a few blocks away, the subtle hum of cars passing on the street, even the quiet rustle of leaves in my yard. Those small, ordinary noises reminded me that the world wasn't just this intense confrontation. And grounding myself in the normalcy around me was the first step in regaining control. I forced myself to slow down my breathing, deliberately counting in my mind, feeling each inhale and exhale. It might sound simple, but in moments like this, focusing on something physical, something tangible, helps prevent the mind from spiraling into panic or anger. I reminded myself that no matter how loud she got, no matter how threatening her words seemed, she didn't have any actual power over me unless I allowed her to. My property was mine. My rules applied, and I had already done nothing wrong. That mental clarity was crucial. As she continued to glare, I realized she was testing me. Every little motion, every pause, every hand gesture was designed to provoke a reaction. She wanted me to snap, to yell back, or even to make a nervous mistake that she could use against me. Recognizing that was key. Instead of reacting, I started observing. I watched how she moved, the patterns in her speech, the way her eyes darted when she tried to intimidate. Observation is powerful under pressure because it shifts the focus from being on the defensive to gathering information. Suddenly, instead of feeling threatened, I felt in control, as if I had a puzzle in front of me rather than a dangerous opponent. I also made a conscious effort to maintain a neutral expression. My face had to show nothing but calmness and composure, no matter how absurd her accusations sounded. That was harder than I expected. Every instinct screamed to roll my eyes, to argue back, to show some emotion. But I resisted. I imagined that every sarcastic expression or impatient sigh would only fuel her aggression. By keeping my face calm and my voice measured, I could project the confidence that I was in control, which in turn would make her feel less dominant. People like her thrive on the perception of fear. Remove that, and much of their power evaporates. At the same time, I reminded myself to speak slowly and deliberately when I did respond. My first words were carefully chosen, neutral but firm, aimed at acknowledging her presence without escalating the situation. I said, "I understand your concerns, but everything on my property is within legal limits, and I am happy to discuss anything that may actually violate the rules." That simple sentence did a lot. It positioned me as reasonable and informed, while subtly implying that her complaints were baseless. Keeping the tone calm and professional also made it clear to any neighbors watching that I was composed and rational. Mentally, I also started to rehearse potential outcomes. Staying calm under pressure isn't just about the moment, it's about planning ahead. I thought about what I would do if she escalated, if she called authorities, if she tried to confront me physically, or if she posted something online to make me look bad. Having a mental plan for each scenario allowed me to feel less reactive and more prepared. I visualized myself handling each possibility with calm and confidence, which, surprisingly, made my heart rate drop a little more. Another technique I used was internal humor. I reminded myself, silently, how absurd some of her claims were. The way she complained about the hedges blocking her view. The dramatic gestures as if she were auditioning for a reality TV show. It sounds strange, but finding tiny elements of humor in a tense situation can prevent fear or anger from taking over. It creates a psychological buffer, a small, safe space in your mind where logic and composure can thrive despite external chaos. I also reminded myself that silence can be powerful. I didn't need to fill every second with words, and sometimes saying less communicates more. By staying silent at key moments, I forced her to speak more, revealing her intentions, exaggerations, and inconsistencies. Each sentence she delivered gave me more insight into her behavior and strategy. While my calm, measured presence reinforced that I wasn't intimidated. This subtle power shift is something most people don't recognize in the heat of the moment. But it's incredibly effective. Even as I maintained composure, I also kept my physical posture intentional. I stood upright but relaxed, shoulders back, hands visible and open, not crossed or clenched. This posture signals confidence and control, not aggression, which is essential in de-escalating a potentially volatile situation. My feet were planted firmly, ready to move if necessary, but not in a defensive crouch. Everything about my physical presence was meant to convey calm authority without provoking more hostility. As the minutes passed, I realized that staying calm had another unexpected benefit. It affected her too. I noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. She began pausing more, frowning as if something wasn't going according to plan. Her attempts at aggression seemed less sharp, more forced. By not giving her the emotional reaction she was seeking, I was gaining leverage. She couldn't push me around, couldn't intimidate me into acting rashly. And this frustrated her without me having to do anything beyond staying calm. At this point, I was fully in control of the mental game. I had transformed from someone being threatened to someone observing, analyzing, and quietly planning the next move. My calmness was a shield, a strategy, and a weapon all at once. Even though my heart was still beating a little faster than normal, the sense of fear that had initially gripped me was gone, replaced by clarity and resolve. I could handle whatever came next, and I knew it. By the time the confrontation reached the point where she seemed ready to escalate further, I was already mentally prepared. Staying calm under pressure had given me perspective, strength, and a strategic advantage. I knew exactly what she was doing, why she was doing it, and how I could respond in a way that was smart, safe, and ultimately satisfying. In that tense, charged moment, I realized that calmness isn't passive, it's active, deliberate, and incredibly powerful. It transforms fear into clarity, chaos into order, and confrontation into opportunity. After calming myself and regaining a sense of control, I knew the next step was crucial. It wasn't enough to simply withstand her aggression. I needed a plan that would neutralize her without escalating the situation further. I stood there for a moment, watching her fume and gesture wildly, and I realized that the key was to think several steps ahead. This wasn't just about a single confrontation, it was about ensuring that my property, my peace of mind, and my dignity remained intact. I had to be smart, strategic, and patient. The first thing I did was observe her behavior carefully, almost like a chess player studying an opponent. Every twitch, every glance at her phone, every exaggerated hand movement provided clues about how she operated. She seemed confident because she assumed I would react impulsively. But I had learned to harness that assumption to my advantage. I mentally mapped out her strengths and weaknesses, recognizing that her aggression was mostly performative. She thrived on making others uncomfortable, but she lacked a clear, logical strategy beyond intimidation. That gap was my opportunity. Next, I considered my resources. I knew I had the law, common sense, and social observation on my side. I also knew that documenting the encounter could provide protection if she decided to take things further. I discreetly positioned my phone where I could record without making it obvious, ensuring that any over-the-top gestures, threats, or violations of property boundaries would be captured. This was a subtle move if she realized I was documenting her. It could either deter her from escalating or, at the very least, provide me with evidence should she attempt to manipulate the situation later. I also thought about messaging the HOA preemptively, knowing that sometimes a neutral third party can diffuse tension. I drafted a quick note in my mind explaining the situation calmly and factually, emphasizing that all my property items were within regulations. This was part of the plan, to show that I was reasonable, informed, and prepared, which would contrast sharply with her irrational behavior. The clever part of the plan wasn't aggression, it was demonstrating control, foresight, and logic. Mentally, I rehearsed possible scenarios. What if she tried to escalate verbally? I would respond calmly, keeping my sentences concise and factual. What if she tried to record me or twist the story online? I would ensure my own evidence was stronger. What if she crossed the property line physically? I would know exactly where to step back, call authorities if necessary, and maintain a safe distance. Every detail was considered in advance. Having a roadmap of possibilities gave me confidence and a sense of empowerment. Then came the psychological aspect of the plan. I needed to make her realize, subtly, that her intimidation tactics wouldn't work. But I couldn't confront her directly yet, that might escalate things. Instead, I would rely on the power of calm, confident body language, careful observation, and strategic responses. I knew that people like her feed on emotional reactions. By staying composed, I would chip away at her confidence. My plan involved patience, letting her make mistakes while I maintained control, ensuring that the upper hand gradually shifted to me. I also considered leveraging neighbors' perspectives without calling attention to it. If anyone was watching, I wanted to ensure they saw reason and composure rather than conflict and chaos. This would not only validate my actions but also discourage her from continuing her aggressive performance. The clever part of the plan, I realized, was not just about protecting myself, it was about setting the stage so that any further confrontation would make her look unreasonable while I remained credible and calm. I even created a mental script for potential dialogue. When she accused me of violations, I would respond with facts. All of this is within local code. I am happy to review any official complaints. And I want to maintain peace in the neighborhood just like everyone else. Short, precise, calm statements that didn't give her room to manipulate or provoke me. The clarity and calmness of this approach were key elements of the plan. It was disarming without being confrontational. Strategically, I also considered timing. I realized that letting her vent first would work to my advantage. People like her often expend energy shouting and gesturing, and once they start, they're more likely to make mistakes. My plan was to remain silent during her most aggressive moments, observing and waiting for an opening. That opening would come when her anger temporarily weakened her reasoning, when she overextended her gestures, or when she paused for breath. That was when I would subtly assert control, turning her own intensity against her without escalating. I even visualized the perfect outcome of my plan. In my mind, she would leave frustrated, realizing she couldn't intimidate me, while I would remain composed, safe, and in control. She might tell herself she tried to scare me, but the reality would be that I had outsmarted her entirely. The anticipation of that moment was motivating, reinforcing my determination to stick to the plan and maintain calm under pressure. Another crucial component of the plan was communication. I wanted to make it clear, without aggression, that I wasn't a person to be bullied or coerced. My responses had to be firm but polite, confident but calm. This balance was delicate. Too aggressive, and I risked escalation. Too passive, and I would appear weak. The cleverness of the plan was in finding that precise equilibrium, asserting authority through calmness rather than confrontation. Finally, I considered the long-term effect. I knew that once she realized she couldn't intimidate me, it would discourage future attempts. The plan wasn't just about this encounter, it was about sending a subtle, lasting message that threats and aggression wouldn't work against me. By thinking ahead, I could ensure that this confrontation would end on my terms, reinforcing my confidence and securing my property in a way that was safe, legal, and clever. As the tension built and she prepared for her next move, I felt a surge of confidence. The careful observation, the preparation, the mental rehearsals, the calm breathing, and the strategic planning all came together. I was no longer reacting. I was acting with intention. I knew exactly what I needed to do and how to do it. The clever plan was ready to unfold. A combination of calm authority, strategic foresight, and psychological insight. Every action she took could now be anticipated and countered thoughtfully, ensuring that I remained in control from start to finish. In that moment, as I stood on my own property, I realized that the confrontation wasn't just about her threats anymore, it was a test of my composure, intelligence, and strategic thinking. By staying calm, observing carefully, planning deliberately, and leveraging every available resource, I had turned what could have been a stressful encounter into a controlled situation where the outcome was in my favor. The clever plan wasn't about confrontation. It was about winning without losing my cool, protecting my space, and ultimately outsmarting someone who thought they could intimidate me. By the time she prepared for her next verbal onslaught, I was fully ready. Every detail of her previous behavior, every exaggerated gesture, every accusatory word had been cataloged in my mind. I had waited patiently for this exact moment, the moment where her own overconfidence and entitlement would give me the opening I needed to regain full control of the situation. She took a step closer, her voice rising, as if she could intimidate me by sheer volume. But I didn't flinch, didn't step back, and didn't raise my voice. I held my ground, calm and steady, as if nothing she said could shake me. That simple display of composure immediately made her pause, her brow furrowing in confusion. Her initial attempt to scare me with a flood of words and accusations began to falter because I refused to give her the reaction she craved. I responded slowly and deliberately, each sentence precise and factual. I understand your concern, but everything on my property complies with local regulations. If there's a real issue, I am happy to address it formally. My tone was calm, even polite, but my words carried authority. I could see her tightening her lips, her eyes narrowing, as she realized that her usual tactics weren't working. Then came the moment I had been anticipating. She tried to step across the property line, leaning aggressively over the fence and pointing at my flower beds. I calmly took a small step forward, not retreating, not aggressive, just confident, and simply said, "Please stay on your side of the fence. It's important to respect boundaries." My tone was firm but non-threatening. I could see the frustration flicker in her eyes. Her entire strategy relied on fear and intimidation. And by asserting a simple, reasonable boundary, I had already disrupted her narrative. I decided to escalate my clever plan subtly. I reached for my phone, pretending to casually scroll while making sure the camera was recording. It was obvious enough that she noticed I was handling something and her curiosity distracted her from her own aggression. People like her are often performative. They want attention. They want drama. And they want to feel in control. By acting like I had my own agenda, I created a subtle power shift. Suddenly, she was reacting to me, not the other way around. As she attempted to argue, her statements became contradictory. First, it was about the hedges, then the decorations, and now, apparently, the spacing of my garden gnomes. Each new complaint seemed more absurd than the last. I allowed her to ramble just enough to expose the illogical nature of her claims. I kept nodding slightly, never agreeing, but never cutting her off abruptly. This small adjustment made her feel heard while allowing me to gather more evidence of her irrational behavior. It was a psychological tactic. By letting her speak, I controlled the narrative. I also leveraged the presence of neighbors without making it overt. I noticed someone peeking through their blinds and another stepping out to water their plants. I made a small gesture, a polite nod, acknowledging them briefly. This was enough to show that I wasn't alone. Without escalating the situation, the knowledge that witnesses existed often deters further aggressive behavior. It was a quiet but effective part of the strategy. Then I acted on the most critical part of my plan, the documentation. I started recording her gestures and words discreetly. Every exaggerated motion, every raised voice, every threat about calling authorities was now on tape. She noticed eventually, her eyes widening slightly as she realized her actions were being recorded. Her posture stiffened, and she began choosing her words more carefully. I didn't confront her about it directly. I didn't need to. The simple act of recording created accountability and forced her to self-regulate, giving me the upper hand. When she tried to threaten me with the HOA again, I calmly said, "If you've already contacted them, I am confident they will handle it according to the rules. I always comply with regulations, and I am happy to cooperate with any legitimate concern." The calm assertiveness in my voice contrasted sharply with her rising frustration. She had expected fear, but instead, she got logic and control. That combination completely disarmed her, and I could see the subtle shift in her confidence. As the confrontation continued, I subtly maneuvered her further from the center of my property. By engaging her in polite but firm conversation, I was able to guide her movements without seeming confrontational. Every step she took revealed more of her exaggerated aggression, which I quietly documented. I was no longer reacting. I was orchestrating the situation in a way that ensured she would ultimately look unreasonable to anyone observing. While I remained calm, confident, and completely within my rights, at one point, she attempted to raise her voice even higher, probably hoping the volume would overpower my calm demeanor. But I held my ground and continued speaking in a measured tone. "I am happy to discuss anything in writing if there's a legitimate concern," I said, my words deliberate and composed. The contrast was stark. Her rage and my calmness. People like her thrive on emotional reactions, and by denying her that satisfaction, I gained the upper hand psychologically. The turning point came when she realized that none of her tactics were working. Her voice faltered slightly. Her hand stopped gesturing as wildly, and I could see hesitation creeping into her posture. That's when I subtly pressed my advantage. I maintained my calm tone and gently reminded her of the property boundaries once more, emphasizing legality and respect. "Everything is fine here, and I want to maintain peace in the neighborhood. Let us keep our interactions civil," I said. That small nudge was all it took. She paused, clearly assessing the situation, and the aggressive energy that had dominated the entire encounter began to dissipate. Finally, she muttered something about contacting authorities again, but it lacked conviction. I gave a polite nod and smiled slightly, not in mockery, but in reassurance that I was confident and calm. That tiny gesture was the final element of the plan, demonstrating that I was composed, rational, and in control. Her threats had lost their power because I refused to play the game on her terms. The clever plan had worked in every way I had envisioned. By the time she left, she looked flustered and frustrated, unable to claim victory because there was nothing to claim. I remained calm, collected, and fully in control of my property. I had turned what started as an aggressive confrontation into a demonstration of strategy, patience, and composure. Every move she made had been anticipated and countered subtly, without aggression or confrontation on my part. Outsmarting her wasn't about shouting louder or matching her fury, it was about using calm, intelligence, and subtle psychological tactics to neutralize the threat entirely. Standing there after she finally drove away, I felt a rush of satisfaction. The unexpected threat had been transformed into an opportunity to demonstrate control and cleverness. I had outsmarted someone who thought entitlement and aggression could dominate. By staying calm, observing carefully, documenting discreetly, and responding strategically, I had ensured not just victory in that moment, but also a lasting sense of confidence and security. The entire encounter was a testament to the power of calm thinking under pressure and the effectiveness of a well-executed plan. After the confrontation ended and she finally drove away, a strange calm settled over my property. The tension that had gripped me moments before dissipated, replaced by a sense of relief and quiet triumph. I took a few deep breaths, letting the reality sink in. I had not only defended my property, but I had done so with patience, intelligence, and composure. It was a victory in more ways than one. The adrenaline that had been pulsing through my veins began to slow, and I felt the weight of the encounter settle into something reflective rather than reactive. It was in these quiet moments that the true lessons began to emerge, and I realized that the confrontation had taught me far more than I initially anticipated. First and foremost, I recognized the importance of staying calm under pressure. The initial threat had been overwhelming, and my instincts had urged me to react emotionally, to match aggression with aggression. Yet, choosing composure over impulse had been the decisive factor in outsmarting her. I realized that control over one's own reactions is often more powerful than any external action. By remaining calm, I had maintained authority over the situation, subtly shifted the power dynamics, and ensured that I never gave her the satisfaction of seeing me intimidated. It was a lesson in self-mastery, one that I knew would serve me in countless other aspects of life. I also reflected on the value of observation and patience. During the encounter, I had learned to watch carefully, noting every gesture, tone, and contradiction in her behavior. Every movement she made was an opportunity to gather information, to anticipate the next step, and to plan my response accordingly. Observation had allowed me to act strategically rather than react impulsively, turning a threatening scenario into a controlled environment where her aggression ultimately worked against her. Patience, I realized, was more than waiting. It was an active practice of assessing, evaluating, and choosing the right moment to respond. That insight alone had transformed what could have been a stressful ordeal into an opportunity for tactical thinking and empowerment. Documentation had proven to be another critical element of the aftermath. Recording the encounter had not only provided evidence but also reinforced my sense of security and control. Knowing that I had a factual record of her actions removed a layer of uncertainty and fear. It was a reminder that preparation and foresight can neutralize even the most unpredictable challenges. The simple act of documenting the encounter was a subtle form of power, one that ensured accountability without escalating the confrontation. It was a tool I would never underestimate again. Reflecting on the psychological aspect, I realized how effective subtle strategy can be. I hadn't needed to raise my voice, make threats, or assert dominance physically. Instead, by calmly asserting boundaries, maintaining composure, and allowing her to reveal her own irrational behavior, I had outmaneuvered her completely. It was a lesson in how intelligence and emotional control can outweigh sheer aggression. The encounter highlighted the importance of using wit, observation, and calm reasoning as tools to navigate difficult interpersonal situations. In a world where entitlement and bluster often try to dominate, measured strategy can be more effective than brute force. Another takeaway was the importance of community awareness. Although I hadn't called anyone for help during the encounter, being aware of neighbors' presence had subtly reinforced my position. The knowledge that others were observing made the aggressor more conscious of her own actions. And it also gave me a sense of security. It reminded me that even small, passive forms of support like the silent observation of bystanders can impact the dynamics of a tense situation. It was a lesson in understanding the environment and leveraging social context without needing overt intervention. Emotionally, I felt a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and empowerment. The satisfaction didn't come from defeating someone or proving superiority. It came from demonstrating to myself that I could handle a stressful situation with intelligence, patience, and composure. I had stayed true to my principles, respected my own boundaries, and navigated the encounter in a way that aligned with my values. That realization brought a deep sense of pride. It was a reminder that the most meaningful victories aren't always visible to others, they are often internal. A confirmation of personal integrity and strength. As the day progressed, I began to reflect on the broader implications of the experience. Life, I realized, is full of unexpected challenges, and often, the people who create conflict do so because of their own insecurities, entitlement, or need for control. Confronting such behavior doesn't require matching it. Instead, it requires strategy, self-awareness, and calm resolve. By treating every encounter as an opportunity to exercise patience, observation, and intelligence, I could turn potential stressors into opportunities for personal growth. This perspective shifted the narrative from one of victimhood to one of empowerment. I also thought about the importance of legal knowledge and preparedness. Knowing my rights, understanding the rules of property and neighborhood regulations, and being able to reference them calmly had provided a foundation of confidence throughout the encounter. It reminded me that preparation isn't just practical, it's psychological. When you know the rules and your rights, you can face challenges without fear or hesitation. That knowledge, combined with strategic thinking, forms a powerful toolkit for navigating confrontations in everyday life. In retrospect, the experience was transformative. What had begun as a stressful, unexpected threat had evolved into a series of lessons about composure, strategy, observation, and personal empowerment. I realized that these lessons were universal, applicable far beyond this single encounter. They were tools I could use in personal relationships, professional settings, and everyday interactions. Staying calm, observing carefully, planning strategically, and asserting boundaries confidently are skills that extend far beyond neighborhood disputes. They are life skills. Ultimately, the aftermath reinforced a profound sense of personal strength. I had turned a potentially intimidating encounter into a demonstration of control, intelligence, and calm authority. The aggressor had left frustrated and unable to claim victory, while I had emerged confident, composed, and empowered. The lesson was clear. Threats and aggression can be neutralized not by matching them, but by staying grounded, observing carefully, planning strategically, and executing with calm intelligence. That understanding transformed the encounter from a stressful episode into a story of triumph, one that I could carry forward with pride and confidence. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across my yard, I felt a deep sense of closure. The confrontation was over, but the lessons remained, etched into my understanding of how to navigate challenging situations. The power of calmness, strategic thinking, and observation had been proven, and the experience had strengthened my confidence in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was a reminder that every unexpected threat carries the potential for growth. Every confrontation can be a lesson, and every challenge presents an opportunity to demonstrate intelligence, composure, and resilience. Standing there quietly, reflecting on the day, I realized that the true victory wasn't about outsmarting someone else, it was about discovering the strength and capability within myself. That insight, more than anything, was the lasting takeaway. The encounter had ended, the aggressor had gone, and I had emerged not only unscathed but stronger, wiser, and fully aware of the power of patience, composure, and strategic thinking. In that moment, I understood that life's unexpected challenges can be transformed into opportunities for empowerment, and that calm intelligence always has the potential to triumph over aggression.